Hey, good evening, Friday night. Always a great night. Every night's a great night at PJNET. And we always look forward to Friday nights. Always we have. But this and every Friday is a little special because we have a contract with American refugee Roger in the great state of Louisiana. And last week,
how's everybody doing?
We were having some problems last week, and I am really hoping we've got that ironed out this week. And you know, Roger, you called me earlier. It's the funniest thing, and we were kind of going over. Roger tries to brief me on the topics that's on his mind. I've asked him that since we have a contract and he's a well-paid professional, you know, I'm entitled to some work. And Roger, you called me early in the week, and you said.
I said that I wanted to get into this topic of toxic masculinity and what nonsense it was and the war on men. And then within a day or two, you were calling me and you were saying, Roger, had you already seen this Gillette ad before you called me? And I said, no, Mark, it's that topical. It's like the next pile on thing in all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And we're gonna get into that tonight. But Mark, before we do, I want to tell you something because before I lose track, you keep track of the clock tonight, okay? Right. And you decide when we end off tonight.
I don't have my whistle,
but I'm going out all night. Yeah, I'm going out all night tonight after we.
You have a date
tonight. I
don't
do very often.
You have a date.
Well, I have a date, and let me tell you what's going on tonight. You got to love the city of New Orleans. I have a love-hate relationship with my hometown. I love it and I hate it. Who dat? Saints are going to the Super Bowl. 1 win shy, 1 win away. But a couple of years ago, New Orleans decided to do a gun buyback program.
There's been so many successful ones, you know.
Oh, there have been so many successful ones. And this one was particularly silly the way it worked out because they were paying $100 for any handgun in working order, which meant people weren't going to bring them very good stuff for the most part. But what it also meant is some cheap guns were available. And so people were lined up to get $100 for their guns, and a whole bunch of people just went and people started buying anything good for $1.25, $1.50, $1.75. People got some real good deals on firearms. And not too much got taken off the streets, you know, quote unquote. So in their wisdom, the city of New Orleans a couple of years later is doing another gun back program. And they've told us we can start, you know, we better line up early because they have limited dollars. They don't, you know, and they haven't told us how many guns they're going to buy. But it's only 1 gun per person, okay?
Mm-hmm. That was smart.
No questions asked. So on, it's a firearm in working order.
If the idea is to get people disarmed, what if you have more than 1 gun?
Well, I guess it's just because they want to try to hit as many different people for some reason as possible, and they have limited funds, and you know they don't want they're going to run out of money at some point. You know, they're not going to be able to buy every gun, I guess, but particularly because since they were concerned about the way it didn't work out last time, you know what they're doing this time, Mark? They've increased their buying price. Yeah, it's $500
sold
for any gun in working order. So among my collection, I have an old little 6-shot Rossi revolver. It's in pretty bad condition. It does work. It's not worth $200. I might be able to get $150 for it privately. I might be able to get $100 for it at a pawn shop. But I'll be going and getting $500 for that gun. I'll be going and sitting in line all night getting $500 for that gun. And I'll be going and buying something a little better tomorrow.
And, okay. So it's about nice. 8:30 where you're at. You're saying this starts what time tonight?
We're going to line up at midnight. And and they start buying at 11 o'clock in the morning. So a friend of mine I are going out there, and we're just going to bring the cell phones and the chips and the energy drinks and our cell phones and watch movies and hang out all night, kind of like you used to maybe do in college, waiting for the tickets for the football game.
Yeah, the student tickets.
And we're going to hang out all night. And he went and bought a little .22 single-shot rifle for $125 today that he's going to be selling for $500.
What a disaster.
So, Mark, I can't fathom what sense this makes. Like, I try to figure out what do they think they're doing? Do they think they're achieving something? I know there was a run on guns in pawn shops today, I guarantee you. And I know most people, in fact, I was a part of a group chat, and one guy specifically was bragging in the group chat that he had 4 bums lined up.
Yeah, go down.
That he was going to pay. He was paying $100 a piece to sell the little crappiest things he had, and he was selling 5 of his crappiest guns. He was going to go get himself a really nice AR-15. And after this,
you can't make this stuff up.
Mark, you can't. And sometimes with stuff with liberals, Mark, stuff doesn't have to make sense. I think it just has to feel good. And I think a lot of people are looking, as I segue with that, into the war on men and toxic masculinity, and they think that. They think, well, maybe this is just stupid. No, Mark, there's a whole agenda behind this. There's an entire agenda that's going on behind the war on men. Let me ask you a question first. I don't know if we're technically to a place where we can do something smoothly. Since I've brought up the commercial, are you capable of basically I just sit here and watch with you actually showing the commercial, and then we continue talking about it, or we're not technically there yet?
Well, we could if I'd have known that ahead of time and had some time to do it. What we can do is in the edited version that will be made public and shareable, we can certainly there may be some copyright issues though, but we can certainly put that's fair use. That's fair use. We're asking for comment. We're commenting on it. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's fair use. I think most people have probably seen it. And I think most people have reacted to it properly. I have talked to some naive women, even some conservative women, who don't understand the war enough. And I'm going to get into the nitty gritty of some of the things that were really disgusting about this commercial. Mark, you saw it. What was your first impression of it, just seeing it blind? What was the very first thing that popped to your mind?
The first thing that popped to my mind is there was no effort in that commercial to mention their products or sell you their products. This was not that kind of commercial. Now, by the way, that's not unprecedented. Geico has spent millions trying to get us to chuckle. However,
correct.
The stuff they put out would be funny if you're a liberal or a conservative. It didn't politically appeal to one side of the political spectrum more than the other. So for a company to entertain us, Budweiser, we will soon be seeing their best, spends a lot of money just trying to make us feel good. Associate
Mark,
good feelings with their name. But this ad,
I'm going to give an example because it's educational. Just a woman in New Orleans that I happen to know she's a liberal, but we have some things in common other than politics, and we're friends. She put a very funny joke on her Facebook page today. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that made it so funny is that whether you were a Trump lover or a Trump hater or in between, you could laugh at it. And it was a picture of Trump, and he was holding up a sign. He said, the New Orleans Saints are going to win the Super Bowl, and the Atlanta Falcons are going to pay for the parade. Okay.
That's good.
You can hate Trump and laugh at that. You can love Trump and laugh at that. Yeah. And it's particularly funny to us in New Orleans because the Falcons are our arch rivals, and the game is in Atlanta this year. And the mayor of Atlanta has already come out and said she does not want the Saints in the Super Bowl. Okay. And that she's not looking forward to the idea of the Saints being in the Super Bowl. So it was funny.
For the record, folks, the Saints and the Falcons are bitter rivals.
Bitter rivals, arch enemies. But I'll tell you, I went in and I gave a thumbs up and I gave a lassie face and I said, congratulations, Lonnie, because that's a great joke. That's the kind of joke that Trump lovers and Trump haters and everybody in between can enjoy. Good job. Unfortunately, here came all the people piling on afterwards, just trashing Trump or that. And as good of a joke as it was, people just wouldn't let it go.
Well, the joke got lost,
Mark, Sad, the joke got lost, and one of the things that's one of the things that ticks me off about this commercial. I'm going to let you go on and talk, but I just wanted to give the lesson about, you brought up Budweiser making us laugh or smile or cry about a puppy and a horse, whatever it was. You can do things that everybody can relate to. Companies more and more are doing these incredibly divisive things that start a hell of a lot more arguments than they do make people feel good.
All right, fairness. That's not reserved for the people on the left. Okay, Chick-fil-A is very
Right.
forward about their Christianity. Hobby Lobby, others. Not the shirt I'm wearing, Nine Line Apparel. Roger, I haven't bought a T-shirt in 30 years. Hadn't bought any clothes for that matter, unless they were work clothes that I need uniform.
Hold up, though. Chick-fil-A is open about it in that they defend their right to not, pay for abort-efficient birth control, or that they choose to close on Sundays. I haven't seen particularly controversial Chick-fil-A commercials.
Well, their building of their brand is postured Christian. They put out the music they play in their store is Christian music.
Right.
They hand out little video on the drive-through. If they see a kid, back in the old days, remember cassette tapes? They'd give you a little cassette tape which had a gospel message woven into a story. But what I'm saying is that this is not reserved. Back a while,
No, it isn't.
a long time ago, some people were outraged that Subaru had taken out ads in some magazines. I don't know them, but they were homosexual, gay magazines, and I said back then, I said, this is a very slippery slope that we're going down, because companies in a free market economic system, companies really don't care about your politics. They care about you buying their stuff. So if you get mad at Ford for taking out an ad in a left-wing magazine or a homosexual gay magazine, first of all, companies don't care. They are chartered to make money, and if that means selling to people that they just don't, in a purely free enterprise capitalistic model.
Right.
But this ad, but Nike just came out with theirs.
They came out with theirs.
They're taking, I guess, calculated risks to shake it up. But when you take risk like that, it seems to me that you're kind of desperate. You're trying to do something to jar it loose. So I don't know the economics of it, but that was my
Gillette
first
still
impression.
has a
No mention of the product.
Okay.
Number two,
No mention of the product.
observation: many of the men portrayed in that video needed to shave. But what was particularly telling, because I do have a background in advertising, and I'm going to turn it back over to you. There was a lineup of men. Now, you can't see the entire lineup in a lot of the pictures that are rendered on social media, but the lineup included 13 men in front of a grill with some corn on the cob, and there were none. They were basically all white. You don't do now. You could argue one or two of them were kind of dark skin, brown,
Kind of,
but their
maybe,
ethnicity was not, And I know from my experience in advertising, my experience in focus groups, and I know when advertisers spend millions and millions of dollars producing the ad, okay, they are very careful to get as much demographic representation in there as possible. And it's hard for me to accept the notion that was an oversight or a mistake.
It was the second thing I noticed. The first thing that I noticed was just the overall stereotyping of men and associating bad behaviors just with being men, or as though they were normal among most men. But the next thing I noticed was the racial makeup. And I know that lineup that you're talking about. In that lineup, there's like 12 or 13 that's all white. But if you look at the whole commercial and you count, there's roughly 40 to 45 men in the commercial.
There's 43.
And you looked it up and got the exact number. Okay.
I'm taking the word of Joseph Paul, whatever his name is, but 43. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you take his name, but okay. Let me tell you my estimations, and then you might have some exact numbers. To me, there were 40 to 45 men. Well over 30 of them were white. Almost all of them that were portrayed negatively were white, and the vast majority of them that were portrayed positively were black. There was a very racial element to the commercial of not just that men are bad and men need to do better, but white men are bad, and white men need to do better. You picked up on that?
I didn't, but and I forget his name, but you know who I'm talking about, Carl Joseph Watson or Paul Joseph Watson, whoever. He's very foul-mouthed, but he's very entertaining. But 43
Yeah, he might be
men,
Australian or Norwegian or
he's
yeah,
got
I know who
that
you're
hackney.
talking
Yeah.
about.
There were 43 men portrayed negatively. 42 were white. There were 5 men portrayed very positively. 3 were black, 2 were white.
Okay.
Now, again,
So,
I
first of
find
all-
it hard to accept that that is an oversight or a mistake. These people spend a lot of money to not make those
It's
kinds of
stagecraft.
mistakes.
It's stagecraft. They pay very particular attention to every single detail, and there were probably more men that were in the filming of the commercial that got cut out of it. Okay, and they film more than they end up showing in these types of things. So that is stagecraft. That is very intentional. So one of the things that I want to comment on is just that to me there was this racist, anti-white element to the commercial that offended me. But also, the way they rolled their eyes and said, boys will be boys, the way they said, oh, come on, man, we can do better than this. And then they switched to these, and it was almost all liberal news anchors. In fact, they even had Anna Kasparian. Okay. They even had they even had old shooting the bird straight into the camera herself on election night, Anna Kasparian. Okay.
Yeah. Of the Young Turks.
Of the Young Turks, who, it was the makeup of journalists that they showed ranged from like center left to like the super extreme far left, and they're all criticizing these behaviors like rape and like sexual harassment, but it's like, come on, men. And it's this insinuation that this is a part of, in a way I'm going to say normal, and in a way I'm going to say abnormal male behavior, because their message really is that it's common, in that sense, normal male behavior to sexually harass. It is common male behavior, they're saying, to rape women. Okay? But the better male behavior that should be treated as normal, but which is apparently uncommon, is men sticking up for women, men protecting women. And they even go so far, they try to make it like the guy's breaking up a fight, but if that's a fight, dude, it's horseplay. Okay, they try to make it like it's a fight, but it's horseplay between two kids, and then this guy with this very, very concerned look on his face running over there to break up the fight. Okay.
Well, no, he does.
And,
whoa! If he only broke up the fight, that would be one thing. But he says, "Son, real men don't play that way." Yes,
yes, we do,
and it's a good thing. Okay, you'll
Mark,
find this
I
in the
might have
animal
overstepped my
kingdom.
bounds.
This is not toxic masculinity. This is men doing what God wired us to do. We are when time began, Adam and Eve. Okay, in those days, men hunted and killed. You cannot feel sorry for Bambi. You will starve and die.
No,
and
you will
we're
starve
wired
and
that
die.
way. It's a hormone called testosterone. Okay, in our bloodstream, God put it there.
I'm going to give you two examples, Mark. Mark, you know how much I love dogs. You know how much I even love animals that you would call vermin, okay? You know that I like cats, okay? You know I've even gotten attached to a goddamn fish, okay? I love animals, all right? But, Mark, I worked at the SPCA in New Orleans for 1 year as a veterinary technician. Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals.
Okay.
As a veterinary technician. And once a week, I had to work in the back. And when I worked in the back once a week, I would vaccinate every animal that had just come in that day, and I had to euthanize every animal that was just going down that day. In 1 year, I killed about 2,000 dogs and cats. Let me ask you something. Do you think that I sat there and said, I love you, guy. I'm so sorry that I'm killing you. No, I couldn't have done that and survived the job. At the same time, I did love the animals. So, you know, as far as the animals knew, what I was doing is talking to them in a very positive tone of voice. But what I was doing as every animal came in is I'd say, God damn, you're ugly. No longer we'd killing you. Nobody would want you, buddy. I'd scratch him on the head and I'd give him the injection to kill him. Okay. And I would use humor, and I would even use a lot of what might be called male locker room humor to get through the day of humanely putting down those animals, which was what had to be done. because otherwise, what are you going to do? Open up the cages and let them go run out in the street and be strays? We were full. Okay, we took in stray dogs, and when we got full and an animal was past its time limit, they had to be put down. Okay, that's an example of what they would, I guarantee you, call some sort of hideous behavior that was actually very compassionate behavior that needed to happen. I can remember playing.
Okay, Roger, your audio went out all of a sudden. If you can still hear me.
Expression.
There we go.
Yeah, I got a phone call is what
okay.
happened, and I just declined it. And
right,
I don't know yet how to do the settings so that I turn off so
we're
that
good.
I don't get phone calls.
We're good.
But like the big giant phone call went
We're
off
good.
in my ear.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, I can remember years ago, I have a sister who's very liberal. And I might have overstepped my bounds, and I'm going to say that right now because I'm not the parent here. She is, and people have a right to raise their kids as they want to. But goddamn, Mark, I was the boy's uncle, and I loved him. And Eli was pushing 2 years old, and I was over there visiting, and Eli was roughhousing with me. And Eli was attacking me and punching me. And I was pushing him away, and I was roughhousing back. And it was good, solid play and bonding. And my sister came up, and she grabbed Eli, and she said, no, Eli, in this house, we don't hit, we hug. And what I said, Leila, you're his mother, and you can tell him that. But let me promise you something. If in kindergarten, when the boys are roughhousing, that boy says, in my house, we don't hit, we hug, he's going to get the living crap beaten out of him. And then he is going to be isolated from the group. And he is not going to be allowed in to the regular part of the male group, and it's going to hurt that child. Mark, masculinity is not toxic.
Right.
Rape doesn't have anything to do with masculinity.
Masculinity in by itself isn't toxic. Okay. Now we all know foul behavior, and before I go into that. Let's talk locker room talk a minute. There's something that this commercial, and I think the culture, especially among females, they don't understand. Men are very dual personality. There's the locker room guy, who, and Donald Trump made a statement that was inexcusable, but that's the kind of talk. Now, men, let me tell you about Marines, okay? They will defend. They're the best, but they are the rowdiest, foul mouth, obviously there are exceptions, but I've known many. But men in general have this dual personality when we're amongst ourselves in the locker room, so to speak. We talk and act one way, but that's not the way we act in the broader culture. Now, if you took that locker room talk into the broader culture, it would be toxic. Okay. But I think by keeping it in the locker room, it's a safe way of letting out these more primal instincts.
Letting out the more primal instincts around people who aren't hurt by them. And we're not being
nobody gets hurt
when we don't be around women.
I'm not saying the talk is appropriate. Okay, I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying that it serves a function.
In fact, Mark, that locker room talk from Trump, part of it I hated, because he was talking about not caring that a woman was married and going after her and everything. But part of it was some of the most humble stuff I ever heard Trump say. If any of it was true, but some of it was humble. Some of it was very self-deprecating. Yeah. He was saying, man, I went after that woman like a dog and I couldn't get there. I struck out. I failed. He was bonding with the guy who was enamored of him. He was the bigger star, and he was bonding with him by telling him a story of his conquest and failure. He was actually showing humility and kindness.
Or transparency. He was becoming vulnerable. Men don't like to say they lost. They'll make up some story. But
it kind of humanized him a little bit to me. At the same time, no, you don't want to hurt your wife or your daughter, and you don't go say stuff like that around your wife and daughter. And he didn't want it repeated to his wife.
The most vile talker in the locker room would object to a man sexually harassing a woman in the workplace.
Absolutely.
He would come to her defense. Okay, this is what the ad doesn't say. It ignores and tries to counter program that we're out there, pinching, just acting like dirty old men. that's something that we don't pride ourselves in. It's
Men,
just a part
men
of us.
beat
And
the hell out of beating toms. You know how rapists do in prison? God, do rapists catch it bad in prison? Okay, they get, it's no. Men have a very strong tendency to be incredibly protective of women. Okay, and that is in our nature more, and even our aggression. It's about hunting and killing
yeah,
and protecting.
yeah.
Okay, it's
The
largely what it's about.
let me try to focus on a point maybe that you were going to bring up. This ad would not have been successful or made any point 10 or 20 years ago. In fact, I did get a link of an old 1980s Gillette, the best a man could get. This ad only had a possibility of traction in a culture where men have been feminized to begin with.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And men have been feminized, and market's hurting men. Male suicide rates are going up. Men are, and I when I get a little better with my computers, and I have a screen here, I'm going to put up some of the statistics in front of me so that I can cite them a little bit more specifically. But Mark, male suicide rates are going up like crazy. Male testosterone rates are dropping. Now, not among necessarily 13-year-olds. We're going into puberty earlier, okay? Probably because of some of the hormones and foods and things like that. We're going into puberty earlier, but 21-year-old men today are having lower testosterone levels than 21-year-old men had 20 years ago. You're having much more depression among men and a lot less. Men used to get criticized for not talking about their feelings.
Right.
Well, it was a defense mechanism, Mark. Men rolled with the punches.
Well,
okay?
and men are trying to suffer silently.
Exactly. Suffer silently and go function and go do what you have to do. Okay. For example, in a war. Okay. Or in a fight to protect your family's home. Or make a joke out of it. Do whatever you're going to do. You're going to make it something humorous, or you're going to do it silently. This attempt to feminize men and to get them to always talk about their feelings and to get them to, be more sensitive and this and that and the other.
Well, let me find some cultural context to kind of bring that into focus. Having been involved in men's ministry, the topic of the feminization of church is often one of the recurring themes, that churches are programmed to females because men aren't coming to church, so you program to what's there, which pretty much guarantees that men won't come to church because it's just too feminine. Church is basically modeled after school, where you sit down, you be still, you be quiet, you shut up, and you listen. Men don't necessarily fit into that model too well. We like to be outdoors. We like to blow stuff up. We like to make noises with our bodies and whatever. Even in church culture and even Christ in church culture.
Christ is horribly feminized.
We almost to the point it's Mr. Rogers like with a beard. Well, that was certainly Christ had compassion and Christ was sensitive, but he was also a man's man. He wasn't just a man; he was a leader. He led a group of disciples, and he was masculine, and he suffered and died, and he didn't. So we try to whitewash.
He drove the money changers from the temple with a whip.
Well, notice that this comes out in men's ministry. He had to fashion that whip first. So this was premeditated. He had a minute to decompress and say, well, maybe I ought to just cool it here. He didn't just react in anger, unlike Paul, who carried a sword with him.
Wait a minute. The apostles weren't armed, were they, Mark?
Yeah, they absolutely were. Or at least
oh my
Paul
God,
was.
they were armed?
At least Paul was. I don't know about the others, but so even in church culture, there is a cultural context, a force, a headwind that we run against that tends to feminize church. Now, it goes a little bit further than that. And in a cultural context, we've got, remember the success, the popularity of the movie MASH. Well, Alan Alda was
Yes.
the first personification of the sensitive guy as a hero.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this was back then, so he had, he kind of went back and forth. But prior to that, things like the Rockford File, it was all private eyes, detective, and cops. Highly alpha male types. Where here comes Alan Alda.
Jim Rockford was cool, man.
Yeah, drove a Firebird for crying out loud. Smokey and the Bandit, and Burt Reynolds.
Lived in a trailer.
Yeah.
Lived in a trailer on the beach.
Yeah.
And
So, but
Yeah.
then now in the culture, you're seeing more and more that men are placed in subservient positions to women in the workplace. There's just a whole cultural paradigm shift. Now, some of this, by the way, was probably a good thing. Started out with good intentions because women were like, second class in many ways, and women wanted to compete in the market. So yes, there were some disparities that needed to be addressed, but I think we have long since...
Here's the problem, though, Mark, and you'll hear Jordan Peterson talk about this a lot, but here's the problem. There are many asymmetries in society, okay? But when you look at an asymmetry, and then you automatically say, well, this is because it's a male patriarchal society and women are discriminated against, and so we have to fix this, you get ridiculous and ludicrous results. If you hire a plumber, it is extremely likely to be a male. That is not because there are rows of male plumbers out there in the streets beating up women who want to go into the business. It's because there's very few women who want to be plumbers. There's very few women that want to crawl around in the dirt and the crap and the muck and do that kind of hard, backbreaking, disgusting work. There are very few women garbage people. There are very few women garbage men. Okay, certain asymmetries are always going to exist. Now, there's been more women teachers for years than men. That's not because of any discrimination. That's because of who chooses to go into a profession. And anytime that we find an asymmetry, because Mark, God didn't create us equal.
That's right.
He created us with an equality of rights, but we're very different. Some are weak, some are strong. We have males, we have females. We have all of these differences, okay? And we balance each other out, and we create a wonderful society together or a horrible society together, however we do it. And but if you are looking at every single asymmetry and saying we have to have an equality of result here, you just come up with some really sick stuff.
Yeah. So I don't know the future of this ad. I have a feeling that one of the statistics that are out there, the Nike ad, just whatever it said, I don't even remember, with Kaepernick.
Colin Kaepernick, yeah.
Yeah. Had almost 1 million views within 48 hours of it showing up on YouTube. This Gillette commercial seems to have close to 4 million within 48 hours. So this one's on a much. This makes the Nike pale by comparison.
It does. And look, they're not stupid. They knew there was going to be some boycott movement, but they knew that even though they didn't advertise their product in that commercial, they knew people were going to be saying Gillette, 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 Gillette. And there's the argument that there's no such thing as bad advertising. Okay. Well, there really is, but still, they're certainly getting a lot more brand recognition out of this. And I can tell you this, I think from the last stat I looked at, they're somewhere in the low 70s now of their percentage of market share in razors. They used to be way up in the 80s. They've been dropping. Mark, brilliant opportunity for either Harry's or the Dollar Shaving Club to come out with an ad that says, hey, man, let's be men. We don't have to pay $35 for a 6-pack of razors. Real men get steel razors for about $1 a piece. And there's no such thing as toxic masculinity.
Well,
okay?
you have an interesting point here, but see, this is an undesirable effect, okay? Because razor blades should not, the purchase of a razor blade.
No, they shouldn't.
Or your brand loyalty to a razor blade. Is this where we're going? Is this the world we're going to live in where, for example, I won't be buying any Nike products? Ain't gonna happen.
No,
If I had the
not going to
opportunity
happen.
to buy a new car, I'd buy a Ford because when the stimulus came around and they were pushing all this money
They
at
didn't
them,
take any
Ford
money.
said, "No thanks. We don't want the taxpayers on the hook for for the outcome of our company, and if it's good, we don't want to be owing it to Uncle Sam." So, but is this the world we're going to, where we're going to buy products from companies based on their political and social posture, or are we going to buy products based on the merit and price of the product?
Mark, I don't want it to be the world that we're going to, but I don't know any other answer. It's being forced down our throats. And don't think that there's not an agenda with these commercials. And it's
Of course there
multifaceted,
is.
okay? Part of it's satanic, and part of it is quite simply about Mark, gender is extremely important. It's how God made us. There's a sacred relationship between a man and a wife. There's very, very deep theology to the relationship that exists between the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit that can kind of be mirrored in the relationship between a man and his wife. And this idea of a multitude of genders, and it's a direct attack on our very humanity. It's an attack on who we are as human beings. It's an attack on God. It's satanic. It's also political, Mark. Women tend to vote Democratic. Men are more likely to vote for populist or conservative forms of government. Okay, flat out, they flat out are. Okay, and they know that if they can get men thinking like women, okay, that they can elect more and more Democrats. And unfortunately, see, some people don't understand. I do, because I'm the American refugee and I have this beautiful dome up here and I think about these things. Some people don't understand why these big corporations would start supporting what they basically is kind of socialism with the Democrats. Well, the reason they do, Mark, is because it's not pure socialism. And the big corporations no longer need capitalism. Capitalism is most needed by the little guy, by the guy that wants to get in there and compete. The big corporations envision themselves blocking out the little guy, bankrupting the little guy through huge regulations that the little guy can't afford to pay while they can afford to pay it. And then, by the way, huge government means huge government contracts, okay? One of the biggest people to put pressure on the government over the shutdown, if the food stamp things do get cut off, now they haven't been cut off yet, but a time's going to come when they will. It's not going to be just the poor people. It's going to be Walmart and Kroger's. Okay? Walmart and Kroger's make a hell of a lot of money off of food stamps.
And you don't hear this spoken about in conservative circles. They always, you have the stories of the guy in front of you.
There is a marriage between corporatism and socialism that creates something that's worse than socialism, and it's worse than capitalism, certainly. It's the biggest fiend of all. It's fake capitalism. You know, it's crony capitalism. It's this mix of corporatism and socialism, and it's horrible. Okay?
Well, the government becomes a big buyer, you know.
A big giant buyer. A big giant buyer
with
no
purchasing
little
power.
You know,
where people purchasing power is harder to obtain. With a government, it's easy.
Mark, I lowered my cholesterol tremendously. You know how? Niacin. Okay, niacin goes to war with cholesterol, and I massively lowered my cholesterol by taking the vitamin niacin. Now, here there's a couple of keys to it. Number one. And I'm getting to a point here. Number one, you got to get the real niacin, the flush free. There's like you can't get the flush free. There's all these like, oh, flush free niacin. No, that means they've put something else in there that makes it not work. There is now a drug company that's selling a medication called something like Namiacide or something like that. It's niacin. It's all it is. And it's being sold as a cholesterol lowering medication, and they charge a whole bunch of money for it. And when you try to make the argument that all it is niacin, they say, oh, but this is controlled by the FDA so that you know you're getting the real stuff. Bull crap. I don't trust the FDA. Okay. And I don't need the FDA regulating vitamins. And so yeah, I take my massive doses of niacin. And I do flush. I get the itchies and I get the sweats and I get the burns because the niacin raises the histamines in your body, and then that attacks the cholesterol and it breaks down the cholesterol and it gets the cholesterol out of your system. Okay,
you're just
Mark,
a picture
it's
of health,
illegal.
Roger. You're a handsome, strapping young man. I'm proud of you.
Well, people don't know that I'm 95 years old.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're pretty different.
No, it's you can't even legally advertise that niacin lowers cholesterol. You can't say that it treats any disease. They've passed all these laws about what vitamin sellers can't say.
Right.
And Mark, do you think anybody can open up a drug company and start selling something to treat it or cure a disease? No, that's been regulated out. The only people who can do it are the huge corporations.
Yeah.
So that's why they want them voting Democrat. That's all a part of the feminization. It's all a part of this plan of let's have these socialist-style governments will have a cooperation, a fusion between the corporatism and the socialism that that'll block out the little guy.
Great. Well, Roger, you've got a date tonight, and I've got to get to bed early. I've got to work all day tomorrow. But hey, we've had some fun, and it's always good. We've had some great conversations, and I hope we can just get to the point where we can just converse freely, because I have benefited from knowing you, and you're one of the most brilliant minds and analytical minds I've ever met. But you got a little. Too bad you don't drink anymore, because when we used to do that kind of thing for football games, there was always some libation involved.
Hey man, I'm still a hell of a lot of fun at a football game, and I'm going to be rooting on my Saints this weekend, man.
By the way,
one win shy of the Super Bowl.
We spoke with Dale Didway Tuesday. He's on every Tuesday. He's actually going very soon to have an interview with Drew Brees. And I thought of you when he said that. That'll be something.
Look at the interview. You want to see, he's quiet, so people don't realize it. But you want to see a man's man. You want to see a leader. You want to see a Christian. Drew Brees.
Yeah.
Drew Brees is all of those things, and he's smart enough not to go out and make a bunch of political noise and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which really all it does is divide people in the end. He understands that football is entertainment, and he understands that there's fans of all persuasions. But the guy is very pro-military. He's a Christian. I've heard him talk about his relationship with Christ. He has a beautiful wife, great family. And man, at the Pro Bowl one year where things were very relaxed, he had his boys on the sideline with him. And those boys were roughhousing and spilling onto the field, okay? They were actually spilling off of they were trying to do an interview with Brees. The best part of the game was the Brees boys fighting.
Roger, if the Pro Bowl were not held in Hawaii, you reckon anybody would show up?
They stopped doing it in Hawaii. They're moving it around now.
Oh,
they're doing weird things. But the other thing they're doing weird, they're doing it the week before the Super Bowl. So instead of the week after, so it's now in between the conference championships and the Super Bowl. And that also means that whoever's in the Super Bowl doesn't get to go play in the Pro Bowl anymore, because they're getting ready for the real game next week.
Well,
so you have some replacements for those guys.
Well, I've given the NFL all I'm going to give them. So, but Drew Brees is a class act. And I'm just proud of Dale Didway, and I can't wait to hear what he gets from Dale Didway.
I look forward to it.
Next Friday, we'll be talking about something new. Any idea, anything on the radar, or are we just going to wait till a little bit later to figure that out?
We're going to wait till a little bit later to figure it out. We're going to wait and see what grabs me in the next couple of days. And what I liked about the topic this week is that it was both topical with the Gillette ad, but also kind of not just topical. It's talking about this whole trend that's going on in society today that, man, we got to fight it. We got to man up, and we got to teach our boys to man up.
Right. We were trying to, when you first called me before the Gillette ad, we were trying to think of like a title, and I came up with Grow a Pair. Men are not encouraged to be masculine in a good way, and it's really a cultural shift, and I don't see a good outcome if we go that way. I don't know any decent man, of all the men I know, I don't know any man out there that celebrates how he's harassing women, or raping women, or beating up women. This is looked down upon.
No,
so,
the men who do that in private. They do it in secret. They're cowards.
Yeah, right.
They're not real men.
So where, this whole thing is kind of a false flag. Okay, it's an attack on masculinity. It's basically, when you get right down to it, man hate.
It is.
It is.
It's man hate.
It's man
Well,
hate.
Mark, God love you. And I'm going to think about you tonight while I'm out there waiting to get $500 for my cheap little gun. But, man, you could have driven here from Florida if I had told you about it.
Yeah, if I'd have known about it, I might have been tempted. I might have made more money driving to New Orleans to sell some worthless pistol or something to get rid of some old stuff. So, Roger, thanks for showing up tonight. Thanks for the work you do, the research, and the time you spend thinking about our topics. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
All right. God bless you, Mark.
All right, folks, that was fun. I always enjoy talking. In fact, that conversation is the kind of it's almost like you're eavesdropping in on the conversations Roger and I have been having for years and years and years. And what an interesting guy, and I always benefit. And he and I are very different, but I've always maintained a high degree of respect. So let's have a little party tonight. Let's have some fun. Roger will be back next Friday, and we will continue and party hard here live on PJNET.